February 25th, 1944. 9:12 hours. 26,000 feet above Western Germany. The cockpit smells of oil, cold metal, and sweat trapped beneath layers of wool and leather. Frost creeps along the edges of the canopy as Oberleutnant Franz Keller nudges his throttle forward. Ahead of him, the sky is already dirty with black flak bursts, thick and blooming like ink in water. Below, the bombers are coming. You can almost feel the vibration through the airframe as his Bf-109 claws upward, engine screaming against the thin air. Silver shapes stretch across the horizon, dozens of them, hundreds. American heavy bombers locked into neat, arrogant boxes, sunlight flashing off their wings as if they own the sky. Keller grins behind his oxygen mask. This part, at least, is familiar. For years now, this has been the rhythm of the war in the air. The bombers come. The Luftwaffe rises to meet them. Fighters slash through the formations. Cannon fire tearing aluminum and flesh apart. Then, when the job is done, the Germans turn back toward home, low on fuel, battered, but alive. The Americans never follow. They can't. At least, that's what Keller believes as he banks left, scanning for escorts. He sees a handful of American fighters weaving near the bomber's edges. Long noses, slim wings, too clean-looking. Mustangs. Someone laughs over the radio. Those toys again. The P-51 Mustang has already earned a reputation among German pilots, and not a flattering one. Early encounters painted it as fast, yes, but fragile, lightly built, an escort that turns back early, abandoning the bombers the moment fuel gauges dip into the red. German pilots had seen this pattern before. Spitfires, Thunderbolts, all of them deadly over the coast, all of them gone by the time Germany itself came into view. So the Mustangs are waved away in conversation and memory. Another American experiment. Another overhyped machine rushed into combat. Keller pushes the thought aside as his squadron leader's voice cuts in. Targets at 2 o'clock. Break formation. Attack. The sky erupts. Cannon shells streak past, white lines ripping through blue. A bomber blossoms into fire as a wing shears clean off, spinning away in slow, horrible grace. Keller lines up on a B-17, squeezes the trigger, feels the recoil hammer through the nose of his aircraft. Then he pulls up and away, heart pounding, breath ragged inside the mask. Another mission. Another successful intercept. The bombers stagger on, wounded but relentless. The fighters scatter. And just like always, Keller turns east, pointing his nose toward the safety of familiar airfields, familiar ground. That's when he notices something wrong. The radio is alive now, too alive. Overlapping voices. Sharp. Panicked. Bandits behind us. They didn't turn back. They're still here. Keller twists in his seat, straining against his harness, and looks back over his shoulder. The Mustangs are still there. Not one or two. Dozens. They hang above the retreating German fighters, like wolves pacing a herd. Engines steady. Formations loose, but purposeful. No rush. No desperation. Waiting. A chill slides down Keller's spine, colder than the air seeping through the cockpit seals. This isn't how it's supposed to go. He shoves the throttle forward, pushing his engine hard, needle edging closer to the red. The German fighters stretch out now, each pilot focused on one thing: getting home before fuel runs out. And still, the Mustangs stay with them. Minutes pass. Then more. The coastline should be appearing by now. It doesn't. Instead, Keller watches one of the Mustangs peel off from above, drop its nose, and dive on a trailing FW-190. The American's guns flash. The German fighter jerks violently, smoke pouring from its engine before it slams into the countryside below. No escort behavior. No defensive weaving. This is pursuit. Keller's mouth goes dry. The realization forms slowly, like a truth you don't want to say out loud. They didn't come to protect the bombers. They came for us. Ahead, the landscape sharpens into towns, rivers, rail lines, unmistakably German. Home territory. Supposedly safe territory. Another Mustang drops in, then another. Short, controlled bursts. Precise. Merciless. Veterans of the Eastern Front had always said the worst feeling in war was being hunted. Not fighting. Not attacking. Being chased when you're already exhausted. Already low. Already thinking you've survived. Keller understands now. The fragile toy doesn't break apart under strain. It doesn't peel away when the mission gets long. It doesn't turn back at the border. It follows. All the way home. As Keller dives for cloud cover, fuel warning light flickering to life, a single thought pounds louder than the engine in his ears. If they can do this, then nothing in the air is safe anymore. And far above him, the Mustangs tighten their formation and begin the next ascent. The clouds don't save Keller. They never do. He plunges into the gray, instruments wobbling as turbulence slams the airframe. For a few seconds, the world vanishes. No sky, no ground, just the howl of wind and the rattle of stressed metal. Then the clouds thin. Sunlight punches through, and with it comes the unmistakable shape of an American fighter sliding into view off his right wing. Close. Too close. The Mustang pilot doesn't fire. Not yet. He simply stays there, matching speed, matching altitude, as if reminding Keller of something he already knows. You can almost feel the pressure in the cockpit now, not just the cold or the oxygen-starved air, but the weight of time. Every second burns fuel Keller can't afford to lose. Every evasive move costs speed. Every glance at the fuel gauge tightens his chest. This is no longer a battle. It's a countdown. Back at bomber altitude, hours earlier, Keller had felt confident. That was where Luftwaffe doctrine still worked. High-speed attacks, slashing passes, disciplined withdrawal. But down here over German soil, the rules are dissolving. The radio crackles again. Blue 2 is down. I'm hit. Engine overheating. Where are our flak batteries? The answers don't come. The Mustangs don't need to rush. They don't need to break formation to chase every kill. They rotate in and out, fresh aircraft taking turns diving on the stragglers, while others climb back to altitude, engines barely straining. Someone somewhere planned this. Keller banks hard left, pulling enough GS to make his vision dim. The Mustang slides wide but stays with him, refusing to overshoot. That's when Keller notices something else, something far more unsettling than speed or firepower. The American is calm. No wild maneuvers. No desperate corrections. Just controlled movements, as if fuel and distance are no longer concerns. Keller has heard rumors, of course. Whispers passed between squadrons after briefings. Talks of new drop tanks, of escort fighters that could go farther than anyone thought possible. But rumors are easy to ignore when you've survived dozens of missions. Reality is harder. He dives again, skimming just above a patchwork of fields and roads. Flak bursts begin to appear, friendly guns firing upward now, trying to help. Keller almost laughs at the irony. German anti-aircraft crews shooting at American fighters over German farmland. The Mustang pulls up slightly, staying just out of the flak's densest zone, then rolls and drops back in behind Keller. A burst of .50 caliber rounds tears past his canopy, punching holes through the tail of his aircraft. Warning lights flare. The engine coughs. Keller shouts, slams the throttle, instinctively reaching for power that simply isn't there anymore. This is when it hits him. The Americans didn't extend their range just to save bombers. They extended it to erase the journey home. For years, Luftwaffe pilots had lived by an unspoken rule. If you survived the bomber engagement, you had a chance. Even damaged aircraft could limp back. Even wounded pilots could crash land among friendly troops. Now that buffer is gone. The fight follows you. Ahead, Keller spots an airfield, a familiar one. Dispersal pens. A control tower. He keys the radio, voice tight. Approaching base. Enemy fighters overhead. The response is strained. We see them. All units, be advised, enemy fighters circling. Circling. The word echoes in his mind as he lines up for landing. Wheels beginning to drop. He's slow now. Vulnerable. The most dangerous moment of any sortie. And the Mustangs know it. One peels off from above, diving directly toward the runway. Keller yanks the landing gear back up just as tracer fire rips across the tarmac. Another German fighter explodes in a ball of fire before it even touches down. The Americans aren't just hunting in the air. They're waiting at the door. Ground crews scatter. Flak guns hammer away. Smoke floods the field as fuel trucks burn. The Mustang pulls up at the last second, climbing effortlessly back into the sky. Keller realizes with a hollow clarity that even if he survives today, tomorrow will be worse. Because now the Luftwaffe knows the truth. Every mission will cost more. Every pilot lost will be harder to replace. Every takeoff may be followed by an American shadow that refuses to leave. Somewhere far above, bomber formations continue deeper into Germany than ever before. Factories, rail yards, oil refineries, targets once thought safe because fighters couldn't escort that far. Now they can. Keller finally manages to land on a secondary strip, skidding to a stop as his engine dies. He sits there for a moment, hands shaking, helmet still on, listening to the distant thunder of engines overhead. Not German engines. Later, veterans will struggle to explain this feeling. They will talk about numbers, about range, about tactics. But when pressed, they will say something simpler. It was like being hunted from the moment you took off until the moment you tried to land. And the worst part? The Americans were still learning. As Keller climbs out of his battered aircraft, smoke drifting across the field, a new thought settles in. Heavier than fear, heavier than exhaustion. If this is what the Mustangs can do now, what will happen when there are more of them? High above, contrails stitch the sky into white scars, and the long escort continues. The briefing room smells of stale coffee and damp wool. Maps cover the walls, their once clean edges now frayed and soft from constant handling. Red grease pencil lines mark bomber routes. Blue arrows show intercept points. And everywhere, in places that used to be blank, new circles have been drawn. American fighters. Deep inside Germany, Keller sits in the back row, helmet on his knees, eyes fixed on the map as the intelligence officer speaks. The man's voice is steady, but his hands betray him, fingers tapping, knuckles whitening as he gestures toward the Rhine, then farther east. They are no longer breaking off at the border, he says. They remain with the bombers. Then they descend. No one interrupts. No one needs to. Everyone in the room has either seen it or heard it over the radio. Fighters attacked on the way out. Fighters hit on approach. Airfields strafed minutes after landings. The sky itself has become hostile. This is not how the Luftwaffe was built to fight. For years, the doctrine had worked. Intercept, strike, disengage. Preserve pilots. Preserve machines. Let flak and distance finish the job. But now, distance means nothing. Someone near the front mutters a curse. Another pilot shakes his head slowly, as if trying to wake from a bad dream. An older ace finally speaks. His voice is quiet. They are learning our routes. That is the most dangerous part. The Americans don't just follow. They study. They memorize which squadrons take off from which fields, which valleys German fighters dive through to escape, which airstrips are used for emergency landings. Patterns that once meant safety now mean predictability. Keller thinks back to his last flight, the way the Mustangs waited above the retreating formation, the patience in their movements. They hadn't chased blindly. They had chosen. This is not escort flying. This is a system. By spring of 1944, the change is undeniable. Every major raid now arrives with fighters that stay. They orbit above the bomber streams, peel off in disciplined rotations, and reappear hours later over German airspace that was once uncontested. The psychological toll is immediate. Pilots start burning fuel faster, pushing engines harder, desperate to outrun something that refuses to be outrun. Maintenance crews work through the night, patching aircraft that will almost certainly not return tomorrow. New pilots arrive with barely enough training hours to land safely, let alone fight veterans who have been refining their craft for years. And still, the Mustangs come. Keller overhears ground crew chatter one evening as he walks past the dispersal pens. They wait for us now, one mechanic says. Like they know when we're tired, another replies. The word spreads through the squadrons, not officially, not in reports, but in looks and silences. Hunted. The Americans don't need to win every dogfight. They only need to be there long enough to force mistakes, long enough to make every mission feel like a gamble with no safe exit. Even victories feel hollow now. A bomber shot down costs ammunition, fuel, time, and every second spent attacking is another second the Mustangs use to close the distance. Keller feels it during his next sortie, the tension before takeoff, the way his hands shake slightly as he straps in. He scans the sky constantly, even when there's nothing to see, because experience has taught him that empty sky means nothing anymore. Somewhere above, they might already be waiting, and beneath all of it, A darker realization begins to spread through the ranks of the Luftwaffe. This isn't a temporary setback. This isn't a new tactic that can be countered next month. This is the Americans taking control of time and space. They decide when the fight starts. They decide when it ends. And, increasingly, they decide who gets home. As Keller climbs into his aircraft once more, the engine coughing to life beneath him, he understands something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The bombers are no longer the real threat. The real threat is what follows them. High above, contrails begin to form again, thin white lines stretching deeper and deeper across the Reich. And for the first time, Keller wonders whether the sky itself has already been lost. The change shows first in the eyes, not on the maps, not in the communiques sent to Berlin, in the pilots themselves. Keller notices it as he walks across the field at dawn, boots crunching on frozen grass. Conversations stop when officers approach. Laughter, once sharp and defiant, now feels forced, cut short the moment engines start turning over. Everyone scans the sky instinctively, even on the ground. A year ago, takeoff had been the most routine part of the mission. Now, it is the most dangerous. Mustangs have begun appearing unannounced over airfields, dropping low, strafing dispersal areas, ripping through parked aircraft before flak crews can react. Engines scream. Pilots scramble. Sometimes the Americans are already gone by the time guns open fire. Sometimes they aren't. During one morning alert, Keller watches a newly arrived pilot, barely 20, freeze halfway down the runway as tracers stitch the earth ahead of him. The young man pulls up too steeply, stalls, and crashes in a plume of smoke and flame. No enemy shot him down. Fear did. The Luftwaffe tries to adapt. Orders come down to conserve fuel. Avoid prolonged engagements. Use altitude. Stick together. None of it works for long. Because the Mustangs don't fight the way German pilots expect them to. They don't always dive into turning dogfights. They don't chase kills blindly. They disengage when it suits them, climb back to altitude, then reappear 10 minutes later when German pilots are tired, low, or distracted. Keller encounters one such pilot during a chaotic engagement near Magdeburg. The Mustang flashes past, gun silent, as if uninterested. Keller almost laughs, until 2 minutes later. The same aircraft dives out of the sun, rounds slamming into his wing root. The American had been waiting. By mid-1944, the attrition becomes impossible to ignore. Experienced pilots vanish from the roster. Some killed, some missing, some grounded permanently after injuries they can no longer hide. Replacements arrive faster, younger, and far less prepared. Keller flies with one of them on a late afternoon intercept. The boy's voice trembles over the radio. He burns fuel wildly, jerking his aircraft through violent maneuvers every time a shadow crosses his canopy. When the Mustangs arrive, calmly, methodically, the young pilot panics. He dives straight down, engine screaming, wings shuddering. The Mustang doesn't follow. It doesn't need to. The German fighter disintegrates against the ground seconds later. That night, Keller sits alone in the barracks, helmet beside him, listening to distant engines. He can no longer tell which side they belong to without looking. Somewhere higher up the chain of command, the realization finally hardens into truth. Men like Adolf Galland argue bitterly with superiors, warning that the fighter force is being bled dry. That without air superiority, everything else, armor industry, cities, will be exposed. The response is always the same. Hold on. New weapons are coming. The Americans can't keep this up forever. But Keller has seen the opposite. Every week, there are more Mustangs, more pilots, more fuel, more confidence, and always the same terrifying endurance. The Americans no longer treat Germany as distant enemy territory. They treat it as a hunting ground. By late summer, Keller stops counting missions. Numbers feel meaningless now. Each flight exists in isolation, a single thread stretched between takeoff and landing, if landing comes at all. On one mission, he returns alone. No wingman, no radio chatter, just empty sky and the echo of gunfire still ringing in his ears. As he taxis in, ground crew members stare at him with a mix of relief and disbelief. They stop asking questions. They already know the answers. That night, Keller writes in his notebook by dim light. He doesn't describe dogfights or victories anymore. He writes about waiting, about listening, about the moment after landing when he realizes he is still alive. And beneath it all, a single, inescapable understanding settles in. The Luftwaffe is no longer fighting for control of the sky. It is fighting to survive in it. And above Germany, the Mustangs circle patiently, engines humming, ready to follow anyone foolish enough to believe the old rules still apply. The order comes down quietly. No ceremony, no speeches, just a shift in tone. Intercept when possible. Avoid unnecessary combat. Preserve pilots. Keller reads the directive twice, then folds a paper and slips it into his jacket. He doesn't need to be told what it really means. The Luftwaffe is no longer expected to stop the bombers, only to slow them. It is an admission that would have been unthinkable in 1941. Back then, German pilots believed air superiority was a birthright, earned over Poland, France, and the opening phases of the war in the East. Now in the spring of 1944, they are being asked to choose survival over control. And above them, the Mustangs notice. The Americans fly differently now, more confidently. They roam far from the bomber boxes, sweeping ahead, probing airfields, loitering over known climb-out routes. It feels less like escort and more like occupation. Keller experiences it one afternoon while climbing through scattered cloud layers after takeoff. His aircraft is still heavy with fuel, his engine straining as he reaches for altitude. Then the warning comes. A shadow slides across his canopy. He looks up and sees 3 Mustangs already above him, wings rocking gently as they turn. They had arrived before the bombers, before the intercept order, before the fight was even supposed to begin. Keller never gets to altitude. The engagement is brief and brutal. He dives, rolls, pulls hard enough to make his vision narrow to a tunnel. The Mustangs don't chase blindly. One breaks off, another replaces it, then another. Fresh pilots, fresh engines. This is what control looks like. He survives only because flak erupts nearby, forcing the Americans to widen their turn. Keller limps back at treetop height, engine coughing, every sense tuned to the sky above him. By the time he lands, his hands are numb. Across Germany, similar stories pile up. Airfields attacked before dawn. Fighters destroyed before wheels leave the ground. Pilots killed without ever seeing the bombers they were meant to stop. The Americans have learned something fundamental. You don't have to destroy an air force in the air. You can strangle it on the ground. Under commanders like Jimmy Doolittle, the escort fighters are given freedom their predecessors never had. They are told not just to protect the bombers, but to hunt the enemy wherever he appears. And they do. The effect is cumulative. Morale collapses quietly, without dramatic announcements. Veteran pilots are rotated out, not because they are safe, but because there are too few left to lose. New pilots are rushed through training programs shortened to meet impossible demands. Keller flies with one such pilot on what may be his final mission. The boy listens carefully, follows orders, does everything right. It doesn't matter. A Mustang dives out of the sun and kills him in seconds. No duel, no chance. Just a clean, efficient burst of gunfire. As Keller returns alone once more, something finally breaks inside him. Not fear, not anger, certainty. This is no longer a contest of skill or courage. It is a contest of endurance and production, of fuel, factories, pilots, and time. And Germany is running out of all four. That night, Keller stands outside the barracks, looking up at a sky filled with contrails that stretch unbroken toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond them, bombers are turning for home, and the Mustangs are still with them, still guarding, still hunting, still refusing to let go. For the first time since he earned his wings, Keller understands the full weight of what has happened. The sky hasn't just become dangerous. It has changed owners. And tomorrow, when engines start again and the scramble sirens howl, the Mustangs will be there first, waiting. Summer 1944. The days blur together now, measured not by dates, but by losses. Keller no longer asks who didn't return. He recognizes the empty bunks on site. The sirens sound again just after noon. This time, there is no urgency in the response. No frantic sprint to aircraft. The ground crews move with practiced efficiency, faces expressionless, as if speed no longer matters when the outcome feels pre-written. Keller straps in, hands steady in a way that surprises even him. Fear has burned itself out. What remains is something colder. Acceptance. As his engine catches, he looks down the runway and sees American fighters already circling far above, silver dots against the sun. They aren't reacting to the scramble. They were already here. The radio crackles with a bitter joke from another pilot. Looks like we're late again. They take off anyway. Climbing is agony. The aircraft feels heavy, sluggish. Every meter gained bought with precious fuel. Keller glances upward constantly, knowing that the moment he reaches for altitude is the moment the Mustangs prefer to strike. And they do. The first dive is textbook. Clean. Silent until the guns open fire. A German fighter disintegrates in midair, pieces spinning away like torn paper. Keller brakes hard, pushing his aircraft to the edge of its limits. He catches a glimpse of the American pilot as they pass, goggles steady, head barely moving. No strain. This isn't desperation flying. It's control. The Mustangs don't swarm. They don't rush. They rotate in pairs, each attack measured, each withdrawal deliberate. When Keller tries to climb, they dive. When he dives, they let him go, only to appear again ahead of him, cutting off the route he was counting on. They know the terrain now. They know the fields. They know the airfields. They know him. At one point, Keller realizes something terrifying. The bombers are gone. They've already dropped their payloads and turned west. The escorts should have left with them. Instead, the Mustangs remain. This isn't escort duty anymore. This is a sweep. By late afternoon, Keller limps home with a damaged wing and a failing engine. He lands on fumes, rolling to a stop beside burned-out aircraft that were destroyed earlier in the day, some on the ground. Some try to take off. Ground crew members don't cheer. They don't congratulate him. They just help him out of the cockpit in silence. Inside the operations room, the map has been updated again. Red circles mark airfield struck. Black XS mark squadrons that no longer exist in any meaningful sense. Someone mentions the Americans by name now, not as bombers, not as formations, but as an organization that seems to stretch endlessly across the sky. The United States Army Air Forces. Keller understands what that name means in practice. It means replacements. It means fuel that never seems to run out. It means pilots who can afford to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Germany can no longer force a decision. The decision has already been made. That evening, Keller sits alone once more, helmet resting on the table, hands wrapped around a mug that has long since gone cold. He thinks about the early days, about the laughter when the Mustangs first appeared, about the jokes shared over the radio. Fragile toy, they had said. But toys don't follow you across borders. They don't wait above your home airfield. They don't turn the act of returning alive into the most dangerous part of the mission. Outside, engines rumble in the distance. American engines, unhurried, confident. Keller doesn't look up this time. He already knows what he would see. Tomorrow, the chase will begin before he even leaves the ground. And one day soon, he suspects, it will end for good. The last mission Keller flies does not feel special. That, more than anything, unsettles him. There is no sense of destiny, no tightening in the chest as he walks toward his aircraft. Just routine. Straps. Gauges. The familiar cough of an engine struggling to wake itself for another day. The sirens have stopped surprising anyone. He takes off into a sky that looks empty. That is how it always begins now. Climbing slowly, Keller scans instinctively, neck aching as he searches above and behind. The bombers appear first, distant, orderly, untouchable. He never reaches them, because the Mustangs arrive exactly where experience says they will. Above, behind, patient. The engagement is brief, not because Keller makes a mistake, but because the Americans don't need him to. They force him down, deny him altitude, shepherd him toward a choice he no longer has the fuel or strength to resist. At some point, Keller realizes he is no longer trying to win. He is trying to finish the flight. A burst of gunfire tears through his fuselage. Warning lights bloom across the panel. He dives instinctively, trees rushing up to meet him. And then, miraculously, the firing stops. The Mustangs don't follow. They don't need to. Keller crash lands in a field miles from the airbase, the aircraft folding around him in a scream of metal and earth. He crawls out, shaken but alive, smoke rising behind him. He looks up. The sky is empty again. Later, as medics bandage his hands and officers quietly remove his flight status. Keller listens to the distant sound of engines passing overhead. Bombers heading home. Fighters still with them. Always with them. In the months that follow, the pattern becomes absolute. German fighters rise less often. When they do, they are fewer, younger, shorter-lived. The bombers come every day now. The Mustangs never leave. Veteran pilots who survived the war will struggle to explain when the balance truly shifted. Some will talk about numbers, others about fuel or factories or leadership. But many will describe a single, unmistakable moment. The moment they realized the Americans weren't just escorting bombers anymore. They were owning the sky between takeoff and landing. The journey home, once a promise, once a refuge, had become a killing ground. And the aircraft they once mocked as a fragile toy had done what no fighter before it ever managed. It stayed. It followed. All the way home. Yendi.